Now we'll start to look at rack building and signal routing. The first thing that I'll say here is that we probably really want to be arranged with the way that we work. So you see here I've got a sense of arrangement, and this is very consistent in how I work. So I've got my masters in rack 1, and these racks are vertical racks, just like in the real world. You can see this overview, which I've blown right up, just to make it easy for you to see. I would shrink it down myself, but here it's nice and big, it's easy for you to see. So I've got 3 racks. One of them contains my masters and my sends. Sends being where I send off to a reverb unit for the whole piece, the whole room. We'll talk about it a little bit more in mixing. The first rack, the next one after that, is my rhythm section. And as you see, I actually send that into a bus. So I bus my rhythm instruments, drum, bass predominantly, into a bus. And as you see, I'm running VST there because I actually really like this fella and what it does for me. So that's organization. So now if I'm saying, look, I'm looking for a rhythm instrument, I know where to find it. It's here. And then there I have my melodic instruments. So that's anything that is more melody than rhythm. Obviously, a lot of this is rhythmic as well, but that's melodics. Then I've got just showing a rack extension here. Remember the rack extension with a proprietary reason format. Some people use these a lot. I don't use them at all. I've just inserted this to show you that they exist. There are some rack extensions, commonly free. This one is from Salig Audio, made by Pitch Blend, called Remark, and it's just a device that you can put in and you can change the color of, and it becomes just a divider, which for some people makes it easier to arrange what they're doing. We're going to get rid of that guy. You can obviously open and close things. Here's another rack extension here. That's SKP, who does a lot of sound work, and his rather cool Fatso or Fat 50, depending on which way you read it. You can open and close things. I personally, when I'm not working on something, will close it down. While it looks very cool in Star Trek to have absolutely everything open, it's also overwhelming on the old noggin. So I will tend to close everything that's not being worked on down, except for these buses. I will leave the bus open so that you can see what's there. Because really, once you've bussed something, what you're looking at is this, not the stuff that's inside it. Buses are kind of the equivalent of folders. Reason doesn't use folders. There's been some pressure towards using them. I'm happy not to have them because there is that natural arrangement of instruments into racks. So you can say, this is my this, that rack. That's my that rack. So I have my melodics. I will then have sound effects. So if I've got swishes and bleeps and blurbles, they'll be in another rack here. And then if I've got vocals, they'll be in another rack after that. And always in order. So your lead vocal will be on top. And I use consistent coloring as well. So coloring here, like for my drums, are always this wheat color. My bass, or my first bass, is always peach. If I have a second bass, then it'll be ochre. Or third bass, it will be brown. Very consistent coloring. Guitars, if I've got them in a mix, will tend to be with the greens here. And synths I tend to have in the blues, especially if they are strings and the like, and pads and what have you. My lead vocal will be a neon violet. Yes, it's ugly, but it's very easy to spot. Where I have buses, then they are lemon color, because it's really impossible to do MIDI work with the lemon-coloured background. There's no contrast, but it's wonderful for these. They stick out they stick out. If I have a really, really large mix, I will then actually send these buses or a collection of these buses to another bus. And I know that sounds complex, but I'll put that bus over here. So in that case, I will write to, and this is more of a mixing thing, a new output bus, and this was a capital and a small, and I will call that, I don't do it for a small mix like this, but I'll do it all in capitals, and then I will set that to bright red, because it's very hard to work with the red one as well, and I'll put that over here, which means that I can have a submix panel over on this side, which before you go, well, that's just weird. No, it's actually completely consistent with the big old mixing desks. You had most of the sliders over here on the left-hand side. You'd have a master section in the middle, then you have a whole other set of sliders. Now, they could be returns, buses, because they're the same thing, but they could also be the buses which are subsections. So all of your rhythm section on one bus, all of your melodics could be on one bus. So you might have a guitar bus and a synthesizer bus and something or other else bus, a choir bus or something like that. And then you have your vocal bus, and you bring the mains of those out onto this side. So you do all your setup work for your mix here. You've got your balances inside each of these sections, and then you can control your sections over here. So it allows you either to be doing your final sort of mix down here, or for me, where I'm looking to just be able to focus things, then I will have an easy way to move sections in and out. That's a little bit more complex, but it's a way of showing you Control-Delete just to get rid of that, of how organized you can be. It requires some planning and thinking. And I know that a lot of people don't want to do the planning and thinking, but that's how they come unglued later, and they end up with a mess. So I'll show you the kind of mess that's quite common. I started here by writing the bass line. Okay, so I'll put these into the order in which they got written, which is commonly what I see. Actually, no, the pad was there first. So we will see a string. We'll fold this guy up because invariably they won't have any buses at all, which is really sad. And so I'll open projects and I'll find this. Only everything will be open. Every single one of these will be open. So we'll have a string here that looks like several rolls of toilet paper that have been glued together. And this is impossible to navigate because it's just a mess. And I know people don't like that, but this is the difference between being able to do a great job or finding that things are just too hard. So if we go over into the sequencer, if we look at how their sequencer and mixer are set up, we will find that they would be something, well, let's put the same arrangements, drums, so pad, bass, drums, hook up. It'll be like that. And to them as such, it makes sense, but it's hard for somebody else. And when they come back a lot later, it's probably harder. Whereas I will say, no, let's be really consistent. Let's put our drums first and our bass second. That's our rhythm section. They're easy to find. And then we've got our other things. I will tend to use the more melodic or the more important things, your actual melodies first, and then your more supporting parts will go later. And a feature that was in Reason actually disappeared for quite a few versions is that if we select all of these, or select all tracks, we can then go select, sort selected device groups. Now our rack will be back in order. So drums, bass, what have you. Get rid of that. So now I will drag these back to, so if I grab my drums and bass, so just shift clicking, I don't need to click them all because I've got this turned on that it's in one of the options. Something about keeping things together. It's there somewhere. It's one of those things I set once and never needed again. So I can put them there, put my rhythm bus back here, and then back to where we were before. So my melodic stuff goes across here, and you see now that this is always going to show us where something's going to go if you're going to drop it. If you've got on top of something, it'll show you targets. Some things you can literally drop on top of an existing instrument. Other things, it'll show you the target of where it's going. Here it shows you we're going to move that. We're going to create a whole new rack to put that stuff in. So now it's tidy, and all three versions, our mixer, our rack, and our sequencer are all the same. And so often when I get Reason things sent to me, they don't match each other. And I know Reason has the ability to say, okay, we'll do that and we'll highlight this, but it is so much harder than if you've actually just arranged it. So you've got the same color here, the same color here, and all of that. You've got to make your own decisions as to how you do that, but this is where you really get to be in control of how things really, really work. So that's your rack arrangements, your sorting devices, your the fact that you can get rack extensions, which are spacers, and the concept of saying, I'm going to use one rack, like real world rack. If you look at some huge old studios, you might find 8 racks along the wall. So I'm saying, okay, along that wall from left to right, I have these kinds of things. Some people have asked, can you put a header on the rack to say, melodics, rhythm section or whatever? And yeah, okay, fair enough. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Some people even ask the ability to have a way to fold these up. I sort of think, well, then you've got to open them again. But I can see my bus here. Some other people might choose to put their bus on top, in which case, yes, this is now telling me at the top of the rack that is my rhythm section. Those are personal choices. So long as you understand your signal flow, then it all is going to make sense to you. Reason is really wonderful for its routing. The first thing to understand, I guess is where we'll have our rack and our mixer open, is that when you create a device, let's just create a Thor. It's got the mix channel header, and it's got a mix channel up here. So they're the same thing. This is really a satellite for this. It allows you to do some of the basic functions, so your levels and your pans. In Reason, anything that you want to send back home, Control, click. On a Mac, it's probably slightly different. It's probably Apple or something or other. Control, click, and it will send it back to its default value. So this is showing you where it's plugging into on our SSL. This is modeled to look like an SSL, hence SSL. So that routing is already done. That wiring is already done. If you don't want it done for you, we can get rid of this. If I hit delete, it'll ask me a question. Boring. Or if I just go Control Delete, it'll automatically take everything away. It'll take the whole group away. It's possible, if we do Control Z, obviously to hit delete and go a selected device only, meaning that I'm left with this mixer channel. There might be a situation in which you want to do it, but it's kind of rare. So we'll create a new device. If I shift, then I don't get any routing. Seeing I have no track in which to route it to, I can add a mix channel, and then I'm going to have to wire it by hand. So I would probably take my audio out. We've got MIDI, but no audio. I would take my audio out to my audio in. It's now up on the mixer. We'll talk about the other options a little bit later. If you're using subarts, then same. But that's routing. Audio routing is surprisingly simple. If I decide that I want an echo unit after this, there are a couple of ways of doing it. You see, for me, it's really habit to be right-clicking or clicking on this and going add whatever. That I'm so used to, and there's the device browser which is there, but it has been improved, and it is better than it was. We can actually narrow it down to certain things. Okay, if I'm looking for a delay unit, it now shows me everything that's marked in the system as a delay unit. A lot of VST won't necessarily be marked. But if I want this fellow, I can drag, and the target shows me where it's going to go, and see it's auto-routed. If I, for whatever reason, didn't have the routing, let's say I had decided to shift drag, then there's a couple of ways of doing it. I could drag this from here to here, and then drag this to here. Let's just change this a little bit. So now we've got an echo unit. The other option is, if this is currently wired to here, is we could just simply unwire it, wire to here, wire to here. It is important to understand how signal flow works. Signal flow is surprisingly easy, and people do tend to go thinking, oh, but it's complex, I can't understand it. Well, if you come in with the I can't understand it, guess what? You're never really going to understand it. So the thing to do is quite simply say, where does it start? In this case, it starts with my finger, because I'm pressing the keyboard, and my finger on the keyboard creates a MIDI note. There's a note on and a note off, and that needs to be sent somewhere. So clicking the instrument MIDI input will tell Reason where to send the MIDI. Just as if I am in the sequencer, you can change this, but to me it just makes perfect sense. So whatever track I click on, you have to set that up by hand in Reaper. I just find that really aggravating. But anyway, starts with my finger, finger hits key, key creates MIDI. MIDI goes to instrument. Instrument outputs audio, because it's an instrument. It's like a guitar, man. It's instruments is audio. So I've got to make sure the volume knob's up, which is by default. I take the audio out and send it to the mix channel. If I wanted to have an effect in between, I take the audio out to the audio input of the effect and take the audio output of that effect to the mixer channel. Now, again, the great news is that if you're just automatically doing this, now let's just get rid of the whole thing. If we're just adding a device, which you can actually do from the sequencer as well, I just don't love doing it because it doesn't always put things where I want them to be. It makes its own decision, which essentially has to be somewhat random. So I can find my Thor. I can even type it in. Thor. Drag that in. Automatically routed, automatically focused. I now decide that I want a delay. So I can type in that, and we end up with, where's the echo gun? Down the bottom, because they're alphabetical, and it's automatic. So most of the routing that you need, the basic routing, is already there. It's already going to happen. That is a wonderful thing. That's giving you the freedom to route however you want, but also giving you the freedom to not really need to route in the obvious situations because the routing is going to happen for you. There are two places in which you can put your effects, and this is a thing that you need to come to terms with understanding. In the real world, when I had my Casio CZ on the floor, I put a jack, an audio jack, into the back of my CZ, ran that audio jack into my Ibanez flanger pedal, out of my Ibanez flanger pedal to the input of the mixing board, so to speak, on the Fostex X26. So that meant the signal chain was synthesizer, effect, mixing board. And that's what I still use. There is another option, however, and this is where we bring the concept of insert. It's the same thing, but we can actually take this and put it in here instead. Now, the way that I've done this, and to have it wire automatically, is I've held shift. So if I undo this, look at the back of the rack, it's wired the way I showed you. If I just, look, my hand touching nothing, drag this and put it in here, the wiring is still the same as it was, which means that it's a bit, you could choose to do it this way, by saying, okay, well, I can fold up the effects underneath this. I personally don't love that. Or if you press Shift as you drag something, it will auto-wire in the most sane, reasonable choice that would be made in this case. So in which case, we've now got instrument going to mixing desk. And then the mixing desk is sending a line out to this box. Here, this hole here is called the insert box. And we can chain effects in here. Let's put in something else. Now, I don't want that after my echo, so I just shift, click, and drag it across. It's wired in. We can test that because if we turn it off, and okay, that is tremolo. Let's just so we've now got a set of effects which are coming after where we've jacked them into the mixing desk. So device jacked into desk, desk has sent out to this little sub rack that could be across the room, and it runs through whatever we put in there and then sends back to the desk. There are some routing options at the top of the desk, pretty standard stuff from the SSL thing as to which of those components come first, which we'll look at in the mixing. It's up to you which way you do it. I don't, because I find this cumbersome, not because there's anything wrong with it, but just because to me it makes no sense. Why would the effects sort of come before the instrument itself? I have seen people dragging the instrument into the box as well, but I don't know, it doesn't float my boat. So if we drag these after, then we've got my instrument sitting on the floor, going through this tremolo pedal, instrument, tremolo pedal, echo pedal, going into the mixing board. Hence, I can fold that up. There are certain situations like audio tracks where it does go through the insert. You've got no real say in that, but that makes sense when you understand how tape worked. So routing is surprisingly easy when you're doing normal stuff. And the reality is you are or should be doing more normal stuff sort of 80-90% of the time. So just inserting items will give you the thing that you want and need, but just understand what your flow is. If you choose not to bother understanding what your flow is, then you will run into situations that you don't understand and you'll get frustrated, but that's on you, not on the DAW. What I would advise, because I advise all students to do this, knowing that most of them will not do it, is to actually grab a pen and paper, or Inkscape if you so desire, and actually sit down and draw a box, put synth on it, or write Juno 106 or whatever you want that keeps you amused, and then draw a line to pedal A, line to pedal B, line to mixing desk. By actually physically drawing it, you're engaging your senses and you're going, this is how this works. And you will find that you suddenly do way better as a result of it. So that's your basic audio routing. Reason has its own routing. You don't see really the routing within the mixer. You can't see any of the cables, which is absolutely fine because honestly, they're messy, messy things. But just know that that synth that's going through a tremolo and an echo is coming in here. So if we could see the jacks, we would see a jack sticking into the top of here, but it would be a waste of space to see it. And then we can change its main level here. We'll get into the mixer desk more as time goes by. Now here is where Reason gets really interesting. It has some very, very nice mixer-friendly features. One is that, the two are the same really that I'm going to show you here, is that you can control what you hear. You've got this control room section. It even has its own volume knob. you can control what you hear. So most of the time you're going to want to hear the master, which is my exceedingly cool piece of music. But I can also set it so that I can see what's being sent on send 1, which honestly I never find useful, but there are situations in which it would be. But I use this one all the time. I can listen to what's coming in on a return. So this is the reverb, which I've defined as being the whole room. Tab allows you to flip the rack backwards and forwards. Now, okay, this looks busy, but we've got a reverb unit. And so send 1, the audio is routed from here to our reverb. If we were to create a new reverb unit, let's use this guy. So he's clearly different. Now he will have automatically routed, at least he should have. Yep, no, see, the auto routing here has failed us because it doesn't look the same as what they were used to. Whereas if I put it here, chances are it will work. Yes, it has, in which case I can now drag to there. But I'll unlink this. So if I put in a new one, reverb send 2 goes to this guy here. Now it doesn't matter in this case whether this gets mono or stereo because it does what's called summing. Everything that it takes into this unit just globs together into mono and creates a whole new stereo image. And there's a lot of wisdom in doing that with a reverb unit. And then we return the signal to there. Now, that will auto-route in most normal situations. It didn't here because I have changed something, so the computer's a little confused as to what I want to do. It's made a decision which is rational, but not what I wanted. And you can't expect the computer to know what you want because it's not a mind reader. So in which case you show it. But this means we can do something interesting. You see what I did here and why this failed? I've got send 1 going to input of the reverb. Output of the reverb's not going back to return 1, it's going to this equalizer. So I'm actually changing the sound of the reverb. So if we get rid of that, and we go back and we listen to our return 1, which we've already got, it will be quiet. It needs to be quiet. We can always turn the level up here a bit. Again, with 3 screens, this is super easy. I don't have to be leaping backwards and forwards anywhere near as much. So I've decided to create the tone of my room with a reverb by inserting an EQ to change that tone. So this is one of the great advantages of the way that Reason works, that if I want a module but I want to add another module after it, I can put it in this way. Now other DAWs, increasingly you can do these things, but I just like the way that it happens in Reason. I can put whatever I want in here and you can make really, really complex chains of things. Whether it's wise, a whole other thing, but you can get as interesting as you want to be. So I could decide to put a compressor into here. I could decide to put an overdrive into here. All things that I have done. A room will have its own natural drive or compression or whatever reason that you've got for doing that. So that allows me to listen to just the reverb that's coming back. This is the full signal. It's a bit loud. I'll still leave that loud. I can mute it just to check that my reverb is doing good things for my piece, but I can build my reverbs in a solo, and that's super, super important. I see people trying to build their reverbs fully in the mix and struggling with it because they can't hear it properly. There are ways, as I say, in other things. Increasingly they've got this, but Reason had this way before most DAWs, the ability to do this. To make this feature work, however, Reason do not default this way, which is a little sad, silly, insane. I can kind of understand it because a lot of people don't understand the way digital works and they get weird about this. The default routing from the back of the master section will be master out to the audio out. So that's going to to Windows, to the sound card. Okay, that makes perfect sense. But then you can't use the control room thing. Oh, I'm still hearing that. Oh. And to be perfectly blunt, I actually forgot about that feature for so long because this was defaulted. So one of the reasons that I have a template is because it's defaulted this way. So I hear the control room out. Now people go, oh, but that's not going to give you an accurate render, mate. And it's like, well, mate, seeing we're in the digital world, this little box has absolutely zero impact. So long as you've got this set to master and this set to 0 dB, the signal that's coming out of here and the signal that's coming out of here are completely the same. So unless you have some reason to really not want to, other than not having thought it through, and I'm sorry if you think I'm being condescending, but we do need to have a reality check here, and that's why a lot of people are confused with reason and think that it's just because they haven't had that reality check. It's smart. Use your control room out, and that way you get access to these features. Me, I don't use the volume knob because there's a volume knob on my my Evo 4, a nice big round one with flashing lights. But this ability to switch and hear, to audition my reverbs, to build them, nothing else is quite the same as that. So that's a really, really cool feature, and that's the kind of routing for audio that Reason lets you do. And remembering to set up your default with the control room out means that you have the most control, which is wonderful, especially for a mix engineer or just yourself doing the mixing. Now, the other thing that Reason does is control voltage. I don't really have any in this piece that I built. It's very simple. But let's say we wanted to put some automation of the filter, because it's the laziest, most obvious thing to do. Then we find something that outputs a control voltage. Now, the easiest thing, obviously, is to just go to Pulsar Dual LFO. This is a pair of LFOs that, well, they do actually output audio, and you can use it as a synth, but primarily they don't output. They output CV. So we can take our modulation CV in, we can set it to, say, filter frequency here, and now you can hear my filter frequency wibbling about. It's locked to tempo sync, which is batshit boring as far as I'm concerned. We don't necessarily want tremolo and this, but Reason makes this really, really powerful. And when you're looking at one thing, it's probably not a big deal. But when you're looking at several things, then it can become a big deal. So we can send... Okay, let's go back to the tremolo idea. Let's do the tremolo on board. Now that's obviously happening synth-wide, it's not per voice. If we wanted per voice, we would use one of the built-in LFOs, particularly this one in this case. But the ability to do this sort of stuff, if we wanted that to move really quite slowly, okay, we want people to really hear and feel the vibrato here. It's so easy to do. And Reason's very, very clever. Yes, there are some dedicated devices, but it's also possible to take CV out of lots and lots of devices. So any signal that you are creating, including converting audio, so we could bring audio into audio input, we could bring audio into Thor. Through the magic of here, we could take audio input 1 and send it to CV output 1, and then send CV output 1 to somewhere else. I'm not going to show you because without actually having a clear plan, chances are you'll just get a noisy signal. But it gives you an immense amount of power. That's the main thing I want you to see with this, is that you don't do a single solitary cliche thing. You go, okay, what can I do that's going to allow me to create something really interesting? Something that can be really great is here as we get into audio modulation. We get a gritty edge to that sound. No one's going to go, oh, you're audio modulating that. They're just going to go, ooh, that's interesting. What was that? Is that a Jupiter 4 or something? It's like, no, dude, that's Thor. So you can do a lot of cool things like that. That's good too, audio rate modulations. And that gives us a really, really unique sound, which, while in theory you can do anywhere, is much easier in Reason than most DAWs. Now, one of the cool things that we can do is that we can actually also get into spiders. If we go into Utilities, then we'll find under Reason, we will find Spider Audio or Spider CV. They both really work the same thing. They will auto-rat, which is a little annoying more often than not. In this case, we can say, okay, let's rat all of this differently. Let's take the output of both of these and send that to 2 locations. So one was the filter frequency, and one was... So we can split our signals. If I want to turn one of them upside down, then that becomes what we do there. And we can then take one of these signals, or several of these signals, and merge them. So if I said, okay, well, I want this device, this signal from one device, and this signal from a completely different device, I can put them together, merge them, and then send them to this location. So you see I just plugged over the top of. It is sounding a little interesting and complex, so maybe a little bit worth trying to work out what's actually going on here. And we can do the same with audio, which I will show you in Combinator. So if we've got, let's say we've got this sound here that we like, I'm just going to undo this, and we'll send this back to what we had in the first place, which was here and here. We can say, okay, I like that. Now, Reason has this very, very strong feature called the Combinator. Again, the Combinator has been adapted and modified by lots of other people to do similar, commonly under the term macro, but the Combinator is a big-ass macro. So we'll take these and we will hit Combine. So they're now inside a Combinator. All of these belong the same. Now here's where we can get kind of interesting. We can take this instrument. Let's say I want to build a layered instrument. So I want something else here. Let's go in the browser. No, not that browser. Devices. And let's say, oh, this is a rack extension, which comes within the Reason Plus thing. I'm going to say, let's get rid of this wiring and let's create a little mixer. So in our utilities, we will have just the line mixer. 6 to 2 is fine. I don't want him wired to anything. I thought I pressed shift, but I think I had a whole other key pressed. Get rid of that because we don't want him. Control delete, gone. And so we will say we want our electric piano to go to input 1, we want our FM synth to go to input 2, and then obviously we want to wire this to our output. So this onboard LFO, bit of the old pitch. Let's give it a little bit of drive, but not enough to cause anybody any excitement. Some chorusing. Actually, I'm going to leave that off for now. So now we've got that and this. And this makes Reason as powerful as any Uber synth. Personally, I think more powerful because you've got a broader palette and a broader ability to put them how you want to put them. So we can say, okay, that is now my instrument. This Combinator is my instrument. It's not 2 sounds, it's 1 sound now. And I can say, okay, now I'm going to do some audio processing. Maybe a little less than that. And some echo, because everything is better with echo. Turning off sync. Finding our tone a little bit. It's a little louder than I'd like it to be. And that's a massively powerful feature. Even more so is that you can get in and control and make combinators which behave a lot like an instrument in their own right. So that's an immensely powerful feature. If we open the actual browser and we look, I'll look in some of my own because it's going to be easier. Oh, here's one I prepared earlier. Now let's see where that's gone. Sometimes they wire in strange places when you use a browser. So here we've got an instrument which is designed to look and feel somewhat like a classic instrument, but it's actually a pile of devices on the inside. And we can control the key things, what I've decided as being the important things, on the front panel. Like, we can turn the phaser on. How chorusy we are. The echo, whether it's happening, how long it is. So we've got something that on the outside behaves exactly like an instrument, and we can automate all of these controls and everything like that. But inside, it's actually a collection of devices which are set up to have macro control within here. And we can set up the macro control old school by using this matrix, which is very functional. It can take a little while, but this is intricate work when you're doing this sort of stuff. Or you can actually grab a viable control and say map to a Combinator controller, which is a faster way of doing it. I must admit I mostly do it old school because I like to be very in control, but there's nothing wrong with the other method. And then when it comes into the rack, it is a fully functioning member of the rack world. And that Combinator is either a thing you don't use or really, really powerful. I tend not to use it most of the time, but sometimes for stuff like this, where I say I want to make a standalone effect device or instrument, or I want to wrap one of my VST and give it a little bit more power or a little bit more usability, then Combinator 2 is really very, very cool. So that's one example. If we look at other possible examples, there should be some in here. I think these will be, no. Ah, there we go. That's a bass sound. And here we're rolling in a synth sound and an effect unit. So the Combinator then becomes a nice way of saying, okay, you can have that sound, but to make it seem the way I want it to sound, it needs the effect unit. So you get it together as a Combinator. Let's go back here, look for more things which are, we're probably more likely to find them in pads, I think. Combinator patch here, yep, okay. This is very funny. Anyone who remembers a D50 or ever had one will find this recognizable and probably slightly amusing. So I've got a couple of mimic synth/samplers and some effects built in. And then this is set up to operate as the front panel for it. It's really literally just a combination here more than a fully functioning kind of an instrument. But you can do a lot of pretty cool stuff within Combinator. Okay, so these are all Combinators now, so happy to... This is Combinator 1, really, so they're not going to look that... These were taken from pieces on an album. So if we turn off all of the effects, the effect that we would be hearing would be the reverb that we sent to here. So Combinator is a very, very powerful way of expanding, shall we say, the palette, or deepening the palette within Reason.